Joining us today on Manzanita Writing Press's Oral History Project is Dan Pinnell, owner of Pinnell Carpet One. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So good to have you here today. Okay, so tell me, when did you first come to Calaveras County?
So we opened Pinnell's Carpet One in March of 1976. And so I spent a couple months prior to that scouting the area out, finding a location.
Okay. And this was your first store, or no?
So I grew up in Lodi, and
Okay.
my father had a flooring store in Lodi.
Oh,
And so I was attending Sac State College right after graduation. And my father's brother-in-law knew the Nashes, who had the Chevron station, who still have the Chevron station in Angels Camp.
oh,
And so they were getting some business out of here because people would travel from the mountains down to the valleys for those kinds of services. And so my father thought it would be a great idea if I left college and went and opened a flooring store. Because my sisters grew up in the 60s, and he wasn't really that fond of what the colleges were producing. And so he was anxious for me to get out in the work field. So that's how I ended up here. Was my father sent me up here.
How did you feel about that? Was this okay with you, or?
Yeah, I grew up in that area where you did what your dad told you to do.
Oh,
And I just,
yeah.
that's what he wanted me to do. That's what I did.
So where were you born?
So I was actually born in Stockton, Dameron Hospital. But at 6 years old, my family moved out to the country in Lodi, out by the Harney Lane dump, for those of you who know the area.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up in the rural part of Lodi.
Okay, and you were there how long?
So we lived out there till I was a senior in high school, and then my parents moved to town. And I spent my senior year in a duplex in Lodi, and then my parents moved back out to the country. But I didn't move back home after that. I moved to a tiny little house on the railroad tracks in Lodi that was $50 a month. And I then started commuting to the Sac State Inn.
Oh, okay, okay. So, but you said your parents, before Lodi, they were in Stockton.
So my mom's side, they were Californians for many generations. My grandfather lived in Oakdale, where they had almond orchards. And mom's grandfather was a pastor in Oakdale. And the church still exists, but somebody lives in it as a house.
Oh,
My father was from Oklahoma. And when he was in the ninth grade, they had gone through the Dust Bowl. This is after the Dust Bowl. My father was sent to California to find work to send money home because they were starving. And so they sent him on a bus to California, where he got off and found a job at an ice house. In the old days before refrigeration, they had lots of ice houses.
oh,
And so he worked out here and sent money home to his family.
wow.
My father never made it past the ninth grade. Again, he was raised in that generation where I don't know a lot about my dad. He didn't have that pleasant of a childhood.
Yeah.
He didn't share a lot of stories. The only thing I really know is that he had a horse one time, and he
Wow.
rode a horse. And then he went into the military, which was what changed that generation, right? He went into the military and got a GI Bill, and he was able to come out and buy his first house because you were able to get a loan because you'd been a veteran.
Yeah.
And that, allowed him to get a job. So that, that whole great generation saved the world in World War II. They also came out, changed the way that we all work today. He got a job at a flooring store laying floors,
Uh-huh.
and where there was an older gentleman who took him home to have dinner, where he met my mom.
Oh, awesome.
And so that's how they got in the flooring business. And then my father was probably in his 40s when he decided to go in business for himself.
Okay.
And then they went to business for themselves in Lodi with two other partners.
Awesome. And then you worked for him.
So growing up, yeah, every summer, you had to go out and lay carpet with Dad, even when he was an installer, certainly when he owned a store. And then every day after school, I went and cleaned the warehouse, cut carpet for the next day's jobs, and did those kind of things. But we started working very young. 12 years old, I was in the fields with the migrants, picking fruits and vegetables. mowing lawns, cleaning horse stables for neighbors, whatever we could do. We were expected to work.
Yes.
So he sent my mom and I up here to open the store, and we opened in March of 1976. And then he died in January of 77. And so, and then my mom sold out that store to my uncle. And so I was stuck. Because I wasn't planning on doing this. And so, but what I had found was that because my father had died, I could get Social Security if I went to school,
Oh,
if I went back to college. So I did college 5 nights a week in Stockton at Delta College. And I would drive up here in the daytime and work at the flooring store.
okay. And tell me again, okay, you're in college, but what age are you?
So I'm 18.
18. Oh.
So I opened the store when I was almost 19.
Oh my. That is awesome. That is huge to be in so young. Okay, so Pinnell's in Angels Camp was your first, but you have grown further than that, right?
So yeah, we opened a store in Sonora, probably about '05.
Okay.
And then we opened a store and we purchased an existing store in Rancho Cordova 10 years ago. So we have 3 stores we're running right now.
Okay. And I'm curious, we see these Pinnell vans. How many vans do you have?
I think we have 12 vans with markings on them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. That is awesome. So, did you have any idea when you first started? You're 18 years old and you're starting this business. Did you have any idea that it might grow one day to be these 3 stores in the stretched out area and
No.
doing all this business?
No, obviously not. So I knew I wanted to be in business for myself, even from an early age. And so all the classes I took in college always were about how to run a business or how to real estate. I was really very interested in buying and selling real estate. So I took all the classes I could get in those 2 fields. And really, we were content, just a small mom pop operation. Every place I've gone, my wife's been with me. She's my CFO. She's the one that keeps me on track. She's the one that picks up all the pieces. I go really fast, and she comes behind and cleans up the messes I make.
Yeah. What's her name?
Jeannie Pinnell.
And how did you meet her? Obviously, you didn't know her when you started at 18.
I did not. So I was up here, and I would drive down I lived in Lodi, so I commuted for the first 3 years.
Oh, okay.
And I had a friend who wanted to go out with my wife's roommate. They were attending Delta College.
Okay.
And he said he took me along on a blind date. So I met her on a blind date.
Oh.
And we married about 15 months later.
Oh, awesome. That is awesome. Okay, so you worked with the youth. How did that come to be? Tell me something about that. You working with the youth.
So that goes a long ways back. Jeannie and I we started attending Murphy's Community Church. That's at the old schoolhouse in Murphy's. And this has to be 40 years ago. And there was a guy named there, Joe Wiley, who ran a youth group called Campus Club. And so it was a non-denominational, not related to any church. And they met in Judy Bigelow's house. And he had about between 50 and 70 kids would show up in this lady's house every Monday night.
Wow.
And we would feed them. And then we would break into groups of about 10 kids. And we would let the kids ran the group, but us adults just kind of oversaw it and kept it on track. And it was a pretty special time. I mean, it was a very growing time for me because I was scared to death as a young man trying to minister to these young kids. And so I had to learn a lot. And Joe was a great mentor. Joe Wiley has been involved in youth his whole life. He's just a great guy. And so that was how I got involved in it. Got to go on a couple of mission trips to Mexico with them.
Oh, how
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, was that the one place or did you go into another area? Like, did you work with any other youth groups?
Well, my wife ran the junior high youth group, and that was actually in the old schoolhouse in Murphy's. And then once I left that church and went to a new church, a new startup called Foothill Community Church,
Oh, Okay.
which was meeting at the music room at the high school.
Oh,
And then we moved to the Veterans Hall upstairs, and Pastor Dave Matson, got involved with him, and he had me help lead a youth group there for many years.
awesome.
So we were involved in that too.
So you've been in the youth ministry for a long time of your life. And, okay.
Yeah, well, again, we have three daughters. The
Oh,
oldest one's 44 and the youngest one's 32. And so we were always, in the raising kids business. And so we wanted to be involved in their lives, and we wanted to be involved in their spiritual growth. So that's where Jeannie and I chose to spend our time.
oh, wonderful. That's awesome. That's awesome. And now you're attending the Vine and Branch Fellowship. You've been there as it went from the one church to the other. If you want to elaborate on that and tell about.
So I've been at Foothill Community Church since the beginning, basically 30 years. And during COVID, Chris Communities had been doing a men's Bible group at my house on the back patio. We'd been meeting men there once a month. We'd been doing a thing there. And Jeannie and I could see the anointment on Chris's life, that the Lord was calling him to work with people. And so we came alongside and said, how can we help support you? And so then the next thing we knew, the Lord instigated, there was five families who we got together, and we got a tent, and we put it on the property of Foothill Community Church. We asked permission. We put it out in the parking lot, in the gravel parking lot, because COVID had broke out.
Yeah.
And churches really weren't meeting. And so we saw this need for an outdoor church. And so we put a tent up out there at Foothill Community Church, and we met in the parking lot probably a year and a half. And during that time, the inside pastor, Dave Matson, he decided to retire. And so we asked if we could fill that void. And so the Lord instigated and orchestrated this whole thing where we moved into the physical structure of Foothill Community Church. And it's now called Vine and Branch. And I was fine leaving at Foothill Community Church, that name fine for me, or the tent was called Grafted. I was fine leaving it called Grafted. But the younger people in the congregation, because we realized we needed to reach younger people.
Yeah.
That we were aging out. If you looked across the church, we were a lot of gray hairs. And so we realized we needed to reach the younger people. And so how do we reach that audience? And that's when this new name idea came up, that, we shouldn't be Foothill and we shouldn't be Grafted. We should be something new, to start afresh, to start a new work. And so there was a committee that went off and worked on coming up with that new name. And so that's how we became Vine and Branch Fellowship.
So how was that going from tent to building? That was.
So, yeah, it's been a real journey.
Yeah.
You can't always see where the Lord's taken you. And it wasn't, I had my vision of what things should look like and how they should all turn out, but that wasn't necessarily what the Lord thought. And so we just stayed the course. We just kept trying to build something that he would be proud of, that we felt that he was moving inside of us. And it's been a painful but incredibly joyful opportunity to be used by the Lord.
And there's been some people really touched and changed and set anew in this journey too.
Yeah, it's been a miracle, and so, we attended church for 30 years, and church was church, right? And it was wonderful. We learned a ton from Pastor Dave. I mean, it was a college course in Bible, but now this again, we've become more of a seeker church, and it's more of young people who have never known the Lord coming to find him. And so as an old timer, it's kind of like watching a baby crawl for the first time, the excitement we feel and how we're invested in that child. And, I just want to watch him crawl. And to be the old guy in the church and to watch this growth in these young people is pretty darn exciting. And so our job is just to stand back and say, okay, Lord, how can you use us in this journey? What's my part to play? And my part is the janitor. I get to be the guy who cleans up and fixes things. And I'm just happy to have that job.
Well, you've done some remodeling there too, and so you've probably had a lot of say, and especially since you're Mr. Carpet Man, Dan the Carpet Man.
So my wife, Jeannie, started with a vision. And well, first, again, it came from one of the young couples that we needed. Can we get rid of the red? Can we get rid of the green? Can we get a little more modern colors? And so again, we were trying to, okay, we're listening to the young people. They wanted to update it. And so my wife, Jeannie, met with her friends, some decorators, and they came up with a new theme for the colors and the interiors of the church. And so Jeannie dreams it up, and I'm in charge of figuring out how to make it happen.
She's got really wonderful taste. Now, tell me, there's going to be a whole new coffee section, right? That's kind of the next project?
So again, one of the young guys, he's a highway patrolman in the Bay Area, and he always stops at Three Crosses Church. And he came back with this vision of how people stop there and have coffee, that it's open 7 days a week, right? People might just come by there and fellowship, and I might meet you there for an interview or whatever. And so that was kind of the vision, was recreating that coffee bar experience inside the foyer of the church. And so we're getting pretty close to having it done.
That's awesome. Yes, I'm looking forward to that one. Okay, so you're putting, I mean, so much into, we're going from carpet to your ministry. I mean, you're contributing a lot to our area, our county, and touching people in different ways and making people smile in different ways, beautifying their home, and then being a part of beautifying their soul and with the youth and stuff. I have a question for you.
Okay.
So if a young person, say a college student they've gone through college and now they're looking at their future.
Mm-hmm.
So say they come up to you and they want to know, Dan, what's your secret to success? What's the secret to success?
So my father taught me this, and it's really, really simple. And it's right out of the Bible. It's a yes is a yes and a no is a no. If I told you that I'm going to do your house for a certain price, that's what it's going to be. If I said I'm going to be there at 10 o'clock for your interview, I'm going to show up at 10 o'clock. If I told my teenage kids I was going to do something, they know they could count on me. If the church ministry, if I told them I was going to be all in and take them on a mission trip, it didn't matter whether I was going to lose money. It doesn't matter if I'm sick. It doesn't matter what gets in what life throws at you. Once you say your yes, it's got to be a yes. And so that's been the secret for me for a successful marriage, for successfully raising children, and for successful business. And again, those staying on course is not always easy, but it's right. This is a really old principle, right? I mean, these are things your grandparents told you, is that my word is my bond. That when I say something, I got to do it. And so I try to instill that in everybody that works for me. That guys, if we have to be better than the competition. The whole world has changed. It's gone to big box. Small retailers like me are fading into the dust. And if we don't separate ourselves and make ourselves better than the big box, we're not going to be here. We're all going to work at Home Depot and Lowe's or Dollar General. And so us small businesses have to differentiate ourselves by having such better customer service, such better communication, and always doing what we say we're going to do. That's what's going to keep us in business long term. And again, I teach this to my installers all the time. We have Monday morning meetings every Monday morning, and I'm always telling them, we've got to be different. We've got to do a better job. We're not handymen. We are true professionals performing a trade, and we want it to be special when we get done.
That's awesome. Dependable, reliable, a man of your word. I really like that.
And I know I've failed, guys. I'm sure there's some of you out there I have not done perfect, but I'm trying.
Yeah, well, that's what's important. That's what's important. In my own life, Something else, this is integrity that you're speaking of, and that's been so important. Another thing I found is teamwork. What is your thought on teamwork, building the team?
Right.
Building the team and working together. What is your thought on this?
Well, again, as a young man of 18, 19, in my 20s, I thought it was about me. But again, one of the things I always did was I tried to read every business book I could get my hands on because it always amazed me how people could motivate other people. You know, you take a sports team and it changes coaches and it goes from a losing team to a winning team by the coach. And so that's the job I have in life, is the coach. And I want to be as good at it as I can. So I've spent a lot of time studying and reading, and you realize as time goes on that it's about team. It's about, I'm only as good as the people I surround myself with. And so the journey that I'm on presently is I've been, for the last 10 years, I take a book and I sit down with somebody and I take them through the book. So I take my managers through leadership books, or I take my salespeople through sales books. And so I'm trying to use a curriculum of the book, but to impart upon them what my thoughts are on the book and how that applies to our business. And that's been a pretty successful tool for me.
And if a team member fails, do you just kick them out, or what do you do?
Yeah, I mean,
Is there
as
any
a
trying to help?
as a you know as a believer, I mean, I hopefully I always err on the side of grace by keeping people too long rather than too short. But somebody's got to go. They should know they need to go. It should not be blindsiding them. We should have had a lot of coaching sessions on, hey, you told me you were going to do this. Why didn't this happen? Or um, again, you should never blindside somebody that, I don't know what happened. I just walked in and they fired me.
Yeah.
That should never be the case. We should have had multiple coaching sessions so that you know that I'm not happy with your performance and it's got to get up to speed or it's not going to work.
Yes, yes, yes. I see you as the encourager. I mean, you've stuck it out with Foothill, with Vine and Branch, with the carpet business. I mean, many years, right?
Yeah.
And the youth, and so I see that you would be one to really get in there and try your best to encourage this person, help this person, and get them up to where they should be. Yet, if they did something so horrible that they have to go, they gotta go.
Well, again, one of the things you learn is the company's got to exist.
Yes,
And if somebody's dragging the company down, they've got to go. I mean,
yeah,
we've got to still be in business for the rest of the employees.
yeah. I like it, Dan. I like it. Okay.
So I never, I'd always remember that I am I might be a big store up here, but in life I am a little store. I mean, we're not a big guys, we're little guys. And
We're in the
I,
mountains here.
again, just to have been able to live in Angels Camp, to have raised my children in this community means so much to me. I mean, just here doing community TV with you, people get involved up here.
Mhm.
People fix things, and I just love my community.
Yeah. Is there anything, Dan, that you have not done, that you have not accomplished, that you would like to do?
That's a great question. I wrote out a bucket list probably 10 years ago of the things that I wanted to do before I die. And it changes as time goes on. I think right now my main focus is trying to transfer what wisdom and knowledge I have to the people who are running my company now. Justin Gates is the general manager, and he's running day-to-day operations. And so I would like to give him as many tools as I have that he wants, that to share with him. They say you don't realize this when you're young, but when we get here, we realize, I wish I would have known then what I know now, because that journey would have been so much easier. And so one of Justin sometimes will ask me, hey, Dan, how do you know all this? And I say, because in 47 years, I've made every mistake possible at least twice.
Wow.
And so you try not to make the mistake 3 times. And
Yes.
so that's, try to teach some of those shortcuts to the people that are running the company now. And of course, my other goal is to, you know, my children, obviously my grandchildren's, to see them raised and to watch them grow.
Yes. Yes.
And the church, back to the church,
Uh-huh.
we do have a goal there. You know, Jeannie and I, we see this as our last hurrah. You know, that we were sitting in the pews watching church, being church, and God said, no, we need one more round out of you. We need you to get in the game one more time. And so Jeannie and I, we heard the Lord, and he said, I'm not done with you. I want you to help me build something new, something different. And we are so blessed by this journey to be part of this miracle, to see people coming to Christ, to see lives changed. You know, when you run a Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University and you see somebody get their finances figured out for the first time, or when you run a marriage conference and you see people, marriages improved, when we see people start walking with God, and you see them, we do a thing called Thankful, and they get up and they tell some story about how their life has been changed. And to think that we got to play a small part of that, that we didn't just sit in the pew and die, but God gave us one more chance to be used, to be a hammer and a nail in something he was building.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember when it was one of the Easters? They passed out the nails.
Mhm.
Do you remember
I
that?
do remember that, yeah.
Yes. And that
Yeah.
that was just some things have been done there that's just so different, but so touching and so encouraging. And you're a part of that.
Amen.
You're a
And
part.
again, for God to let me play the game, I am so thankful. You know, think about a football game, how you're sitting on the bench, and you've been on the bench all these years, and you watch the game being played, and I can play the game, I can play the game. And God finally called me off the bench. He said, come play the game. And so I get to be in there. I get to watch it happen.
Okay, coach. Okay, coach, I'm out there now.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. See, God has blessed you.
Amen.
So touched.
I have had the most blessed life to have lived in this county, to have raised my children here, to be involved in a Christian school, to be involved in a church, to be involved in the community. I just, again, you know, Jeannie and I will go down to the Bay Area. You know, you do your shopping down there, and I'm just, I gotta go home. I gotta get out of here. I just want to go back.
Yes, yes, yes. So if I would ask you, what is Calaveras to you?
Home,
Yeah.
you know, it's home. It's that little tiny community where you can still be somebody, where you can walk through Save Mart and say, hey, how you doing? And, you know, when you're at the park and your kids can run around and they can play and not worry about finding needles, or some homeless guy that's, you know, says I can't step across him. I mean, I love our county. Every bit of it. And, you know, we live in the most beautiful spot. Uh, Jeannie and I, again, were very blessed. We belong to a co-op called Carpet One. It's one of the largest co-ops in the world. They run the flooring industry. And we got sent all over the world. I would win trips every 2 years somewhere in the world. And my favorite spot's always to come home,
Wow.
to,
Yes.
you know, to live here, to see this. I mean, I got Yosemite over there. I got big trees. I got Murphy's Park. I got, you know, walking downtown Angels Camp. It doesn't get any better than this, guys.
You know, I heard somebody say the other day, we're truly in God's country
Amen.
here.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. And you know, yeah, you can make a difference. You can make a difference in a little community like this, right? I mean,
Yes.
one person, you know, what you're doing here with the TVs, what you're doing here with the interviews can make a difference. You know, I mean, you're down in Sacramento. I don't know how that makes a difference. It makes a difference when we live in these little communities.
Yes. Uh, when you worked with the youth, Tell me a story.
I'll tell you a story. You know, I was terrified the whole time, guys, to screw up, right? To have that kind of responsibility and to screw up. So it was pretty terrifying. Probably the story I remember the most is Joe Wiley. They're going on a mission trip down to Mexico, and Joe has always led the trips. And he says, "Man, nothing ever happens. It's a piece of cake. Don't worry about it. I'm going to go to a wedding, and you're going to do it for me, Dan." I said, "Well, I don't know." So I take over for him on this mission trip down to Mexico. It was a freaking nightmare. We get they stop at a beach, and the first thing that happens is a young man falls off. There's an abandoned building. He falls off the building and literally breaks his ankle off. It's just dangling there. So I got to pick this kid up from the beach and call him up to the car and go to an emergency room in Mexico. And so I get his father on the phone, and his father says, "My insurance won't work in Mexico. You got to take him to the United States." I said, "Well, so after a little time, okay, so I jump in the car and I drive all the way down to back to San Diego to Children's Hospital where I check this kid in, and then I turn around and go back to Mexico so I can help run this missions trip. And then nothing ever goes wrong, right? Then they gave you these counselors, and this one counselor had been pretty abused as a child, and so he's supposed to be running my groups, and he was taking the kids, and they were sneaking off at night and smoking down on the beach, and they were sneaking out. So, so it was a stretching experience.
Yeah.
So thank you, Joe. It was not easy.
Have you heard from Joe in later years?
Yep, I have heard it from Joe.
Tell me, back to when we were talking about when you met your wife. Tell me about your first date.
Oh, so I met Jeannie at the football game. We went back to my only high school football game I ever went to, and I met her there. And um, my friend, my best friend, was in the military at the time. He was a Marine. I remember writing him a letter saying, "I met the kindest, sweetest, gentlest woman I've ever met in my life."
Wow.
And so then we were dating, and then my father died. So I met her in October, and my dad dies in January. And so I was pretty messed up. I'm 19 years old. My dad dropped dead.
Mhm.
And so I quit calling her. I just was trying to figure out me. And she called, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks after my dad died. She said, "What happened? We were, we were kind of a thing there, and you just disappeared." I said, "Well, my dad died." And she said, "Well, can I just come be with you?"
Oh, wow.
So she came and she hung out with me, and we never looked back. So again, you know, so she was at Delta College getting ready to graduate, and she was accepted to UC Davis. And so I said, "Let's get married instead." So I was afraid she'd go off to UC Davis and find some smart guy. And here I am, So anyway, so she said yes, and so we got married, and so we still lived in Lodi, and then I was able to, again, a lot of things just fell in place for me. One was really going to night school allowed me to get Social Security checks, which really what I lived on because of the flooring business was nothing. It wasn't much of a business. And then I was able to apply and get one of the farm home loans to buy a home in Douglas Flats. And so all of us guys, I was the carpet guy and the electrician and the plumber and the sheetrocker. The contractor who built that subdivision made it so we all could get in. And so we all got in there and got houses, and then Jeannie and I moved up here. So as soon as I got married, my mother, who had been working with me at the carpet store, she said, "You got a wife now, you don't need me anymore. You need to buy out my half." And so I bought out my mom's half, and my wife became my partner. And so we moved up here, and my wife sold window coverings, and then I did the flooring. And her dad actually came up and did my bookkeeping for me a day a week or so, and that lasted for couple of years or whatever, and we just kept growing and growing. Every year we were able to double our business. Um,
So when did you start feeling, okay, this is really making something and I can live now, I can breathe? When was
I
that?
don't know that I ever felt that. I always worried what was my plan B in case this didn't work out.
Yeah.
And so I was always trying to figure, okay, what could I do if this didn't work out? I would say probably about 1982, we finally got big enough, so that's 6 years later, that I could make a living at it, a comfortable living at it, and it was working out for me. But again, for those of you out there, I always hated the carpet business. I never wanted to be in the carpet business. I was told no way I was going to do what my father did. And so I've tried everything but to be in the carpet business at this point. I tried to go into appliances. I went into light fixtures. I built spec houses. I did all these other things, and my wife would just say, "Go sell carpet." And so I went off and built 2 Kentucky Fried Chickens in 1987 and 93. In 87, I built the one in Jackson, and 93, I built the one in Angels Camp. And so I left the flooring business and thinking that the grass would be greener on the other side. And when I got there, what I didn't realize that I had come with myself and the grass was still brown.
Oh.
So I hated the Kentucky Fried Chicken business. And so I went back.
So you were Mr. Kentucky Fried Chicken?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, I did not know this.
So it was a great adventure. It was a great learning experience about franchises and having in 10 years, I had 1,000 kids work for me. So it was a great learning experience. But the moral of the story is the grass was not greener when I got there. And so I was able to come back to the flooring business after that with a whole different perspective of I got to make this work for me and my family and not be so stressed out about doing something I didn't like to do.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me again, and this might be cut, I
Sure.
don't know. But when did you sell the Angels Camp? Kentucky Fried Chicken?
Well, we opened the Kentucky Fried, actually it's been 91. So there was a recession, started in 90. And by the time I opened the KFC in 91, the economy was not that good.
Yeah.
And I hung on to it till 95. And then I sold it to the Taco Bell guy across the street. And then he ran it. And he sold it to another guy who sold it to another guy. And now it's no longer there.
No. Tell me a happy, encouraging carpet story, and tell me a disastrous carpet story.
Well, the disaster is easy. So the worst one that ever happened to me was our installers. We did a 2-story house in Arnold, and when he hooked up the toilet, the O-ring was crooked. And so we left, we're done, and the homeowner comes back up there a month later, and the water had been leaking for a month. And so we have drowned this house. It's a total mess up. And so luckily we have insurance, right? But
Yes.
so they had to, but the poor homeowner, right? We destroyed his house. So that was probably the worst one that ever happened to me. The best one, I would say, is being able to help people anonymously who needed something, to go maybe put a floor in for them, to go help somebody. I mean, Jim Brigant, something one time we went and drilled a well for somebody who had no water.
Wow.
Just those encouraging times when you get out of your comfort box and you go help somebody else. The carpet business again has been a wonderful life for something I didn't want to do. It's turned out to be a wonderful life, a wonderful journey of learning, of helping people, of growing employees. I mean, that's the exciting part is growing people. We've had a lot of people come through that. And my goal is, when you leave me, you better have been better when you came.
Yeah.
Hopefully I've taught you something.
Yeah. So you started when you were 18 with
Yep.
your business. When does Dan retire?
So Jeannie and I have been talking a lot about retirement. She says, so I am hyperactive. So, I mean, I was hyper back when they just spanked you a lot. And so we don't really see Dan retiring. I got to be busy all the time. I've always done real estate also. I bought and fixed up houses on the side. And so I have always had a couple of jobs at any given time. Um, And so I see me stepping back, which I already have. Justin's running the day-to-day operations in Angels Camp in Sonora. I have a partner at the Pro Source in Sacramento. He runs the day-to-day operations up there. My kids have gotten involved in our rentals. They now manage those. So, I've stepped back a lot, which has really which worked out well because it allowed me to step in during the remodel of the church to have the time available to do that. So I don't see myself ever retiring. I don't, again, if you look in the Bible, you don't see it. That's not a principle that's taught of retiring. I think we can change what we do, but I don't see us retiring.
I've seen, because I work with the elderly, and one thing I see is when they keep going, keep pushing, they stay younger.
Right.
The ones that sit down and just, we're
Right.
done,
Right.
are the ones that you see really growing old and. So I project that you're going to be a very young man to the end.